My name is Olivia. I'm 24 years old now. But when I was child, we lived in an old house. The house was originally 4 bedrooms with a living room or area, but the previous owners had built a sunroom on the back of the end 2 bedrooms. My bedroom window opened into the sunroom, and the 4th bedroom, our study, next to mine, served as a thoroughfare between the main part of the house and the step down into the sunroom. There was something not right about the area surrounding the step between the study and the sunroom. I would get chills when stepping over the threshold into the study from the sunroom. Even our cat bolted over that spot, every time without fail. The sunroom had windows down 2 opposite sides with a sliding door on the far side of windows. I hated those windows at night. I always felt watched. This did not change when the curtains were drawn. I also could not sleep in my bedroom at night without my blinds being closed. I felt watched and unwelcome. One night while I was in bed sleeping, something sat on the end of the bed. It sat still for a time, then I heard a woman's voice start to hum. Following this, the pressure changed and it felt like someone was rocking. Then it disappeared. A few nights later the same thing happened, followed by the bed covers being pulled up to my chin and the sheets tucked in along the side. A sudden tingly feeling on my forehead, a kiss. I was not scared by any of these occurrences. In fact, they seemed overwhelmingly calming. The sunroom was a different story. I was not always scared when I was out there. Sometimes I felt nothing at all. At night it was definitely worse. The sunroom was our playroom, so it is where we would watch TV and play. One night when I was maybe 13, I got up to go to bed, and as I stepped over the threshold into the study, I turned my body to switch off the light, and that's when I saw it. The thing that caused all the angst. It looked like a man, but I can tell you he was something else. Pure evil. His eyes were full of hate and the dislike poured off him in waves. He stood at the place where the light switch was, just glaring at me. He was solid but not solid. I could see the wall behind him, but he had substance. I felt that without a doubt he wished me harm. He was holding an axe, not menacingly so. It was just hanging from his hands, but he was terrifying. I was stricken. I could not move. I wanted to bolt but felt as if glued to the floor. I suddenly heard a woman's voice scream, "Go! You don't belong here." Immediately this feeling of warmth came over me, and I realized that I had been freezing cold standing in that spot. I watched as he disappeared before my eyes, and I walked shakily to my bedroom. The woman returned to me that night and sat on my bed for as long as I was conscious of it. I began to realize over time that on the nights that I felt spooked or watched in my bedroom, she came to me. I don't know if she was connected to him in life or if she was simply a guardian of sorts. One night when I was a little older, maybe 15 or 16, it had been pretty quiet for some time with no odd happenings. I was sitting in the sunroom after my younger sister went to bed. My parents were out for the evening and I was babysitting. The lights went off, the TV went blank, not off, just blank. I heard a voice in my ears say, "She is not here to protect you now, girlie. You're stuffed." I jumped up and ran towards the study, but before I could reach the step, he was in front of me, blocking my path. It suddenly occurred to me that I had never seen him outside of this room, and I realized he was not able to cross into the main part of the house for whatever reason governs his kind. I ran to my bedroom window, and by sheer luck it was not on the lock but a mere millimeter off being fully closed. I wrenched it open and climbed in. I fell to the floor of my room, looking back to see him standing in front of the window, hatred pouring off of him. He opened his mouth to speak and I screamed at him, "You are not welcome here, go back to where you came from." He faded at that moment. I was aware a moment later that there was warmth with me in the room and a voice that said, "Hush now, he can't hurt you anymore." I do not know how I managed to rid us of this evil entity. I was not a person with any real strength or training in these matters. Had I banished him? How could my words and conviction alone be enough to rid myself or my home of that? These questions rolled around in my head for days afterwards, and it took me many years to realize that I may not have known what I was doing at all, but I was and have always been a very strong woman. Maybe it was enough that I had the strength of character to face whatever evil was in that room and to challenge it. Maybe there were other factors that contributed to it. There was never anything after that night. I didn't feel watched or uncomfortable there. The room became totally normal, and even the cat was comfortable there. My name Jack. In 2018, my friends GF and her roommate both wanted to sublease their apartment. Their explanation was simply that they were moving one town over. I was actively apartment hunting at that time, and I really loved the apartment layout and the neighborhood. The same night I found out they wanted to sublease, I agreed to take over the apartment and even got a roommate secured. The next day, I went over to the apartment to talk logistics of the swap. At one point, the roommate of my friend's GF mentioned they frequently heard banging in the kitchen. Cabinet doors slamming shut and appliances on the counters moving. My friend's girlfriend looked at her and said, "Shut the fuck up," while giving her that look of "What are you doing?" My dumbass simply didn't take it serious. I had been to the apartment for parties multiple times and never got a bad vibe. A week later, I moved in with my friend and her GF. So 3 of us living together. I don't remember how soon it was after we moved in that scary shit started happening, but we had incidents several times a week for all 12 months. I have a Labrador who was 7 at the time. I've had him since he was a puppy, so I was very familiar with his normal behavior. While in this apartment, he would growl while staring at areas that were dark. He growled at dark corners a lot while we were there. It wasn't neighbors or anything. When we were in the living room, we would hear kitchen cabinets slamming shut and the sound of things moving around on the kitchen counters. I usually left my bedroom door open. When we would be cooking in the kitchen, we would hear what sounded like someone slapping the hangers in my closet. I usually had the closet door open too. That experience happened at least once or twice a week. There was a time we came home and found just about everything in our living room moved around. I like to keep things neat and in their place. That's how the apartment was when we left. But when we came home, it literally looked like someone was hanging out on the couch playing video games. Nothing was missing, so we didn't think someone broke in. We called the 2 girls that lived there before, but they hadn't been over and gave us the only keys. There was a night I was laying on the couch watching TV. The only light on was the hallway light. I saw a tall dark shadow walk across the hallway entrance, moving towards my bedroom. I slept on the couch that night because of how creeped out I was. There was a night I was asleep in my room and I was woken up by my dog growling at the closet. There was a full moon that night, so the room was lit up pretty well. He started with a light growl that gradually got louder. The hair on his back was standing straight up. His stare never broke from the open closet. Soon after, he started to bark. Then he laid his body on top of mine. This is another example of me being familiar with his behavior. Never, in his 7 years of life, had he ever put himself on top of me. Even if I tried to lay him on me, he would always immediately move, as if he thought he was too heavy or something. But in that moment, he was barking at my closet and laying his body on me. I was convinced something was in my room, and he was gradually getting more protective as it got closer to me. I was freaking out internally, but I stayed calm and texted my best friend as everything happened. The whole ordeal lasted about 30 minutes. The last thing I'll share happened right before we moved out. It sure as hell felt like a grand finale too. Then one night I got home from work at 11 p.m. As soon as I walked in, I noticed my roommate's door was open a few inches. They were both at work and I knew they always left their door shut. I took my dog for a walk and when I came back in, their door was now open halfway. My body got hot with fear, thinking someone must have broken in and is still in the apartment. I called them to see when they would be home while I sat on a chair in the living room that was inches away from the sliding patio door. Fortunately, they were only 10 to 15 minutes away. While sitting there silent to try and hear any movement that would confirm an intruder, I heard the long vertical blinds of the patio door move as if someone had slapped them. When my head turned to the noise as a reflex, I saw the curtain to that patio door moved about 2 feet forward. This was just inches from my right arm. I knew the door was closed and locked, and I knew there was maybe 3 inches between that curtain and the glass sliding door. So it would be physically impossible for a person to be behind it. I ran outside and waited for them. We checked everywhere and there was no intruder. I left out a few other times things had been moved around when we were gone. The activity was just constant. What's funny to me is we never considered moving out because at the end of the day we still liked the apartment and the neighborhood LO. We just did our best to ignore everything. My name is Emma. When I was younger, my father lived across from a graveyard, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world, seeing that I had always been very interested in the paranormal. There was a very large empty field of weeds and dry grass that went up to our knees in between our road and the graveyard, which almost made it even more eerie. The second we got OT the house, I was upset that my sister and I had to sleep in the basement alone. There were 13 red stairs into the basement, but our dad laughed at my concern. I didn't know much about paranormal and evil with numbers, but I had a very off feeling about the stairs. The first experience we had was me and my sister staring out of the doorless room from my mattress on the floor. We listened to a woman's very quiet voice try to lower us out into the darkness. I felt a strong urge to go and come with her. But something felt off about her, so I made sure that I stayed with my sister to keep her safe. This must have made her mad because about the second or third night in the basement we started hearing someone walking up and down on the stairs, sometimes on all fours. We always heard it whispering to itself, but we ignored it as it was so quiet it could have just been nothing. That night something happened that changed my life and how I see the paranormal forever. It was another night and activity was more active than normal. The air felt and sounded like static and there was more movement in the dark than usual. We heard her run down the stairs. This scared my sister, so she whimpered and climbed into my mattress right next to me. I grabbed her and we scooted all the way back to the wall. Right when I thought we were safe, she finally presented herself physically for the first time. We stared into the darkness when on the top left of the doorway she poked her head into the room, but something was very, very wrong. My sister screamed, but I was too shocked to move until it pulled its head quickly back into the darkness behind the wall. I dragged my sister into the small bathroom connected to our bedroom. I always lied about the most important detail of that event to everyone I told it to, and myself as well. I always said it was a girl with very long black hair and pale face, which wasn't far off, but my whole life I have tried convincing myself that was the real story because the truth was too disturbing to believe. It had my long brown hair. It had my face. It looked like me, but pale, malnourished and tired. I had always been praised and complimented for my very long hair, but after that I cut it to my shoulders. Recently I asked my sister about the event and the house, and she has no memory of it ever happening. I think it may have been too traumatizing for her to remember, and seeing she was 3 years younger than me, I won't stir those memories up for her because I wish I forgot them too. My name is Amber Watson. I am a self-employed girl, and I grew up in a lower middle-class family. I have been interested in making money since childhood. When I was a teenager, I lived in a small desert town. A tourist town really, think cowboy historic with lots of old buildings and dust. I was able to make some extra cash babysitting on the weekends because there wasn't much else to do in the town anyways. One night I was babysitting for a couple that had an infant. I met them at Target. They seemed like a nice couple and knew of another family I sat for. They lived way out of town. So far out that street names are gone, and you use mile markers as your signs to know where you are. It was an easy gig. Baby was staying asleep, just had to feed him when he woke up. Parents would be back around midnight. I cozied up on the couch with Netflix and settled in for a chill night when the doorbell rang. Thinking it was one of the parents who forgot something, I jumped up and opened the door immediately. To nothing, it seemed. I shrugged and started to close the door when I heard a soft voice. "Miss?" I stopped the door and looked around the corner to see a girl standing on the steps to the porch. She was about my age, had long hair and a hoodie pulled up. But her eyes, they were so light blue they were almost glowing in the dark. "Do you live at this house?" she had asked me. "Oh," I started. "No, I'm just visiting." I was careful not to say too much, because although the girl seemed harmless, she was still a stranger. "Is Mrs. Rosino home?" "I need to talk to her," she asked. She seemed nervous, twiddling her thumbs, looking behind me into the house. "You know what? She just stepped out to go to the store. I can tell her you stopped by if you tell me your name," I said, slightly backing up, ready to close the door. She stepped towards me, eyes darting around, and she put her hand over the zipper on her hoodie. She leaned forward and whispered, "Please tell me where she is. I don't want to hurt you." My heart dropped. She removed her hand from the zipper and really looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, she really isn't here right now," I said with a tight expression. Her face turned desperate, but at that point I had been thoroughly creeped out, so I closed the door and locked it. I called the Rosinos to let them know. Once I described the girl, they grew frantic. They told me they were calling the police and to stay with the baby. I still remember Mrs. Rosino screaming into the phone, "Don't leave my baby," over and over. I ran down the hall to the nursery, threw open the door and ran to the crib. The baby was sound asleep still. I scooped him up gently and sat in the rocker with him in one arm, my phone in the other. "Help will be here soon," I had whispered, more to comfort myself than anything. Then the banging started. I could hear the front door shake from the force used to knock on the wood. Then the sound moved. Why aren't there any sirens? The police station wasn't far from this area at all, right before you turned on the mile marker. They should be here by now. I heard the banging travel along the house, one big knock at a time. Bang. They were by the living room. Bang. They were by the kitchen. Bang. They were by the hallway. I got out my phone and texted 911 help to my mom. She knew where I was babysitting tonight. She responded immediately with question marks, then tried calling. I silenced the call. I couldn't risk answering and the intruders hearing me. My mom would make sure the police got her. I knew it. Slowly moving closer and closer to where I hid in the nursery, the window was locked tightly with the blinds closed. But glass is breakable. Bang. They were at the wall next to the window. I backed away from the window to the corner of the room when I heard the front door creak open. The baby boy still asleep in my arms. I started to cry. I whimpered like a wounded puppy. I couldn't fight someone off while holding him, but I wasn't going to put him down. Footsteps descended the hallway. I heard muffled voices while doors were being opened and closed. "Where is the nursery?" a gruff voice asked. "I don't know, Daddy. I couldn't see the floor plan online." The same small voice of the girl from earlier answered. "If that little girl wants to help them, that's fine, but he belongs to us. No one can keep him from us now. Daddy, please. Maybe she will understand." The voices stopped right outside the door. The baby started to stir. I shushed him quietly and rocked him back and forth. Then I heard the sirens. I shot a thank you up to whoever was watching over me, grateful that this nightmare would soon be over. But the weirdest thing happened. The footsteps didn't retreat. No one ran, no one left, no one moved. I was sure they were going to come in and finish me off, right before the police showed up, and then steal the baby into the night. But that didn't happen either. Loud footsteps came walking through the house. A boisterous voice called out towards the hallway. "Excuse me, sir. Are you a resident here? We got a call that a little girl was in trouble. Is she her?" Muffled voices sounded and trailed off, walking outside. I was waiting to hear anything. Yelling, screaming, more sirens. But it was silent. After what seemed like hours, heavy footsteps walked directly down the hallway toward me, and the door opened. A uniformed officer looked stern, and took a look at me cowered in the corner with the Rosino baby. "Hey sweetie, are you all right?" he asked, bending down to meet me at eye level. "Yes. Those people were trying to take the baby. They were going to kill me." "Why did it take you so long to get here?" I cried out, finally letting the tears fall as the adrenaline hit was coming down. The officer looked confused. "We came out the second the call came in. We made it here in about 5 minutes. Did you try to call in sooner?" He pulled his radio to his face, asking his other officer if any other calls were attempted. "Well, no, but the Rosinos called you at least 30 minutes ago. I called them first and they said they were calling you right away and to hide with the baby." So, I looked down at baby Rosino. He had finally fully woken up and started to quietly cry. The officer just stared at me, a mix of sympathy and fear in his eyes. "Where are his parents? They surely should be here by now. He's probably a little scared and needs his mom. Did you arrest those psychos?" I patted his back and bounced him in my lap to help comfort him. The officer smiled sadly at me and spoke into his radio. "You can send them in." After a few moments, the nursery door opened, and the teenage girl stepped through with a large man behind her. Oh, the girl started to sob, putting her hands up to cover her face. The older man placed his hand on her shoulder and looked at me sadly. The policeman stood and reached for the baby. "No," I shouted. "What are you doing? Are you working with him? This is the Rosino's son." The girl finally spoke. "No, he isn't. He's mine."